Welcome, welcome to Elephant in the Room. On this Sunday, we are into season 2, episode 7. And I had a very eventful weekend. Again, I am Maya, your melanated educator. And so this episode is going to be about truth. There's some truth in there and trust. Truth and trust. Both are very subjective, but they can be objective as well. But they're mostly subjective because it depends upon whose point of view you're talking about. And so my lighting is a little darker. It's more light out here than it is here with me. So you're not going to be able to see me as well, but that's okay. It's about the information and not necessarily seeing me. And so as we go through this, it is hot in Texas. We are full-fledged June. It's June 3rd, and June is summertime. It don't matter what the calendar say. June is summertime for Texas. I've got some tech here I've been playing around with my tech check 1, check 2. So I don't really have to use that with you guys, but as we move out and about into Houston, and I'm checking all of my equipment, we will be using some of it to do our shows live on the scene. Okay, live and on the scene. It is hot in Houston, so you're going to see a lot of sweating. I think people down here are more used to the Texas heat, so you may not get a lot of irritation, but you may get some irritation. You know how when we say things people don't like, they become irritated, standoffish. You know, I picked up a shift today at work. That's going to be interesting. I don't mind working on Sundays anymore. I used to be like, no, I can't work on Sundays. So this weekend I had an opportunity to do some karaoke with my girlfriend as a matter of stress relief, grief relief, and I think it made her happy, and I'm thankful. You know, she had a great loss in her life. Her mom, and that's, parents is a great loss. Losing children, losing anyone that's close to you is a great loss, but there are those key elements, children, that's a great loss. Your parents, your grandparents, people who are very close to you. So I just wanted to offer her some sort of relief, 'cause that's a hard one right there. And you just never know when you're going to see the light again. I see people posting on my Facebook all the time, grief on my personal Facebook. On my public Facebook, you get all kinds of hodgepodge. But on my private Facebook, you definitely hear the grief. People just really dealing with it. So, just helping your friends out, being there for them so that they don't feel alone. Sometimes you can even be in a house with family who loves you so much and want to be there for you, but sometimes you just feel alone in this, when you're breathing. Sorry, y'all, I got to put up my barrier because the flies is coming. The flies is coming for us all. Brought to you by, this one's called Ecologic Flying Insect Killer. So it smells like, I'm misplacing the smell. Almost like Vicks, but not really. It's got a sweeter smell to it. It's got like some kind of cinnamon. What's in it? All right, fine. Here we go. What's in it? Oh, here go a rebellious fly. He wants to get you wants to get you wants to end it today? Is that what you're saying? You want to end it today? Hey, I don't mind ending it for you today. People who won't kill anything are like, oh my words. Let's see, what is it saying? Where are my active ingredients? Where are you? Oh, okay. So you got lemongrass oil. That's what I was smelling. The lemongrass oil. It's only 3%. You got water, white mineral oil, wintergreen oil. It's for alcohol. That's what else I smell. Carbon dioxide. That's what's giving that icy hot smell. The alcohol and the lemongrass and the winter oil together. Carbon dioxide, polyglycerol, oleate, and sodium benzoate. Simple. All right. They're saying that they don't like those. Okay. Which they don't, because they tend to fly away, but after a while they tend to come back. So it's a little hot, so I got my blotting towel. All right. And so this weekend I did that. We did me and the same person who's grieving did the vegan fest. She invited me to the vegan fest the following day. After we did the karaoke on Friday, we did the vegan fest on Saturday. And I have to tell you, it was not so vegan. No, there was chickens and all kind of stuff frying up everywhere. Porks, beefs. It was not a vegan fest. I'm sorry, you guys. You did not tell the truth. This was more of a party fest for people to come and shake their booty and eat some food. We did have the fruit cup, though. And it was beautiful. Let me show you a picture of the fruit cup. Here it is. So, it was beautiful. I don't like all the seasonings on it. And it has some interesting chewy things in it. Which I wasn't really sure what those were. Like a licorice or some sort. Like these little red, that right there, those little red. They were like a licorice type of texture. And they were chewy. It was interesting. But you had strawberry, pineapple, mango. It's the other fruit that it's like, the texture is almost like a melon, but it's even tougher than a melon. So that was interesting. And that's me and my girlfriend having fun. Yay. Had a lot of fun. And I loved her little shirt. See her little shirt? It's so cute. It's so cute. Her shirt. Love that. So we just had a lot of fun. And so we did that. Shame on you all. That wasn't a vegan fest, okay? It wasn't. I'm sorry. And so what I've been getting through is my African origins of the major Western religions. And he really, in a lot of ways, started the dialogue on, I dropped mine. He started the dialogue on talking about how religion plays a role. Because other than that, we've kind of followed those leaders that religion is the major backstory to the activism. And now what you're seeing is us getting leaders that are not necessarily attached to a particular religion. There is a push to pull us back to, if we're going to practice religion, to pull us back to a more African-rooted spirituality, as they were all thought to have begun. I'm trying to end this day today. I got your number. Baby, what's your phone number? So, that is what we are trying to build the collective in, that if we're going to practice our religions, at least know the roots. Know where your religion comes from. Know the history of it. Understand why it was brought into place. Understand who the players were. Okay? This is not a religious show, but just kind of pulling in what we're moving into. A lot of us are moving into a more vegan type of dieting because we're realizing that they messing with our meat. It's not any of the original cultivation, original processes. You have halal meats that are prayed over, blessed over. You have kosher meats. And so these things have been in existence for a long time, but a lot of people are kind of catching up on it because the cancers are growing, right? And we're trying to figure out, why are these cancers growing? Our grandparents weren't plagued with this as much. What's going on? And so, a lot of people believe it's our food. So everything that I'm saying is tying into our truths. How we view our truths, okay? So I wrote down here a few things I didn't want to forget. So one thing I want to remind everyone of is, in my goal of talking and getting information out, I don't think I really am interested in being a subject expert. And it's not because I don't know things. It's not because I don't have the fortitude or the application or the methodology of doing it. It's just that, to me, what I see is there is a section of people that get turned off from that. And that is our audience. That is the majority of our audience. Now, some of us want to attract the more well-rounded, the more progressed of us, and that's okay. My goal is to attract those who have less methodology, those who are more what you refer to as a layman, and not because I think I could talk over their head or anything like that. It's because I feel like that is our segment of people that need the most information, because that is the demographic of people that are left out of the loop. Some people who listen to my show, it's a lot of information that they may know already. Maybe I introduced them to some information, but that's not who I'm interested in attracting. I'm interested in attracting those who don't know as much, or those who are willing to go talk to those who don't know as much information and get them caught up into the group fold of generalized information. Because really, it's a lot of information that we're putting out here about our history. When you talk about 300-400 years of ignorance, of redirecting of information, basically the lies that we have been told about ourselves and about the world around us, and how the African diaspora plays a role in it all, and how those people who were moved around the world for various reasons made those contributions to give rise to other civilizations. And so that's a difficult topic, because we've always believed that it was European influence, and now that we're realizing that it's part European influence, and even more smaller part than we would have wanted to believe in the past. Even I remember as a kid believing that the European influence was great and everybody else was a small part, and now recognizing as an adult that it's the other way around, and a lot of information that Europeans have learned over the years has come from the continent of Africa, and a lot of the resources that Western domination are exploring is Eastern philosophies, especially African, some Asian, some Indian. Those are not minor at all, but the influences are coming from the Eastern world and going back to the Western world, not the other way around. And so you would believe that it started off Western and spread to the East, and that's just not correct information, okay? As far as civilization, as far as everything. So I am trying to appeal to the layman. I'm, of course, okay with all of my educated people, but sometimes when you talk to educated people, it's difficult to get an ideal out because they already know, right? I already know, I know this pathway. I'm bored, I don't want to listen to you. Okay, that's fine. But my message is for the laymen, so to speak. Those who don't know the information, those who wish to spread the information to other laymen so they don't mind listening to some of my ideals. But this is not an experts show by any stretch of the imagination, right? And I'm okay with that. Even if I do have a lot of information that I know and have picked up on over the years, I am not presenting myself as an expert or knowledge guru at all. Even if I will or have become in certain subjects, that's not my intent. My audience is those who want to continue to learn, who wish to expand their mind even further, who want to grab onto some information and use it as a tool to progress in their own life. And so that's just a disclaimer. So what I wrote down here is why we have learned to distrust each other and why our family bonds are so loose. Some people have very tight families, and they have tight families in that they'll go hang out with each other. They're over each other's house all the time. But what I mean by loose family bonds is I mean actually doing business together. And for the most part, in the African American community, we do not live that lifestyle at all. There are very few family businesses and organizations. There are lots of businesses out here, right, by independently owned people, and some of them do work with their family. But there is a saying, and I hear it from people that I know, I've heard it over the years, and that saying is that family can't work together. It's bad business to work with family. Have you all not heard that saying before? I have. And so if that is the culture of the American culture, if that's the mindset that's being portrayed, then how many people are latching on to that mindset and believing in it? Or how many people have worked with family and it didn't work out and they just assumed, oh, that's because you're not supposed to mix family and business. I have to disagree with that premise. some of the most lucrative businesses have started off with family, and they are ran by families. I mean, when you talk about families in this country, that's all we talk about when we talk about power and wealth. There are a few elite families that are running the country and the world. And so that saying about family and business does not mix. It's just a total lie. It's a fabrication of the truth, and it is not what is working in existence today. And so if you do any research on corporations, you'll find that behind them tend to be a powerful family that has taken control of that, and they keep the family in the business in order to keep it in the direction that they want to go. Because if you invite outside groups into your family business, it may not necessarily flow the way that you perceived it to, because outside influences are moving the needle, and their interests are now those that are the guiding light of your particular business. And so I think that that's a misnomer. I think that that is something that is not necessarily true. I think it's something that has been brought to us, and it's just one of those wives' tales that, I hate to call it wives' tale because I'm a woman and that sounds negative towards women, but it's just one of those misnomers, we'll just call it, because family and business do mix, and family and business is why business thrive. Is if you can get your family to buy into the business and believe in the business, then it will grow. Everybody eats, right? So, so with finances, business, with knowledge, we're not sharing knowledge in our family. And I know that this is true because even in my own family, I can honestly say my uncle used to try to sit down and talk about finances, but it was more so from a disciplinary aspect. Like if I did something not correct, he'd want to sit down and talk to me. And there are instances in which he tried to explain finances to us. And I think a part of him may have gave up because we didn't all latch on. And he was the only one doing it. So it kind of made it look kind of like he was the outsider. Everybody else was the norm. Because if I'm going to be honest, spending habits weren't very good in my family. We needed to learn to have better spending habits. We have lots of professionals in our family, but as far as building that model and making it grow, so everybody does better the next generation, that probably needed some work. I think overall the black family has learned to be very independent. Everybody's like, oh, well, I'm doing good in this household at this address, and we do good at this household in this address, but it's not a collaboration. So we're not building businesses together. We're not coming up with ideas. We're not investing together. And so that makes a difference in actual wealth building. It's not just individuals doing well, because I was listening to a talk from Dr. Amos Wilson. If you ever get a chance to listen to Mr. Amos Wilson, you will find that a lot of information that he has put out there as a psychologist. I can't remember whether he's a psychiatrist and psychologist or he's a doctor of psychology. I have to look that up. But a lot of information that you'll find out about him, or about the message that he was delivering about education, about finances, about spiritual growth, what he was able to talk about objectively was the premise in which we were living, the paradigm in which we were living as African people in America, and how that has affected our way of thinking, the way we deal with each other in families, knowledge sharing. And getting back to knowledge sharing, I was raised by my grandmother, and she didn't really share a lot of knowledge in reference to finances, credit, and things like that. She was very private. She would share with my cousin Layla for some reason. She had her balance, her checkbook. But when it came time for me to come along in the household, for some reason she didn't do it. And I don't know why. Maybe she was looking at different strengths in the individual and deciding who would be able to do what. There's a lot in parenting that sometimes the generation before don't understand why parents make the choices that they make. And in my grandmother's generation, they didn't do a lot of talking, just in my family anyway. And for the most part, when I talk to people, they say, yeah, the old folks just expected you to kind of do what they said do with no rhyme or reason behind it. Just do it because you're to be obedient. And a part of that, in my opinion, comes from that mentality that we talk about when we call a slave mentality, is do as I say, not as I do, or don't question thoughts, just act. Some people consider that obedience. Well, to a certain degree, it is. I agree with that. But the other half of it is some children are born with a spirit that they want to know why. They have to know the whys. You have adults like that who were once children and they've always been that person. You have to know the whys behind what you're doing in order to live out that purpose. Some people just don't go by yes sir. They're just not built that way. And so when I talk to people about I guess some innate things that we're born with as far as what we call personality, all personalities aren't just a do and say. Why some people are so willing to join the military and some people aren't, because of the structure of the military, for example, right? Because that's more of a do as I say, don't question, follow orders. And some people are not built that way to follow orders, which is why they don't join the military, for example. So in knowledge sharing, I think we could do a whole lot better in our families with sharing knowledge of our histories. I don't know my family history. They don't talk about it. My mother and father passed when I was 2 years old. I don't even know anything about them except little slithers of information that the family, gave. And that's trauma, not want to talk about such traumatic thing. And I found a newspaper article with my father and mother's name on it, and I'm going to have to probably buy it. So I'm trying to figure out how to get my hands on to see if I can find an archive system that will allow me to get to the information for free. But right now, all I'm seeing is somebody has purchased up archive newspaper articles and are selling it. And I'll hopefully find a loophole to that. I take my time before just automatically buying things. But I saw a newspaper article about their deaths. And, the newspaper article is going to give one perspective on that. But at least I find some information. My grandmother on my father's side shares some. My grandmother on my mother's side, that was just a closed door for her, except when she get mad and say, you acting like Juju, which was my dad. It's interesting. I found the word Juju in this book that I'm reading. I'm like, oh, so that does have a meaning to it. My parents were into African spirituality. So it's ironic that even though they passed away when I was 2 years old, that I am picking this up. So I could be an example for the plausibility of epigenetics, because there is something in me. My family did not raise me to care about African spirituality. My grandmother was just not into that kind of stuff. Most of the things that she did was in the African American community, but she did not cling to anything African. I'm not even sure what her insight was on African. I know that she grew up in the colorism stage, so some things that she used to say spoke to that, as far as color. But she wasn't super negative about color. She just say little subtle things to the darker people in my family, which I was considered the lighter persons in my family, so I didn't hear some of that rhetoric. So that's my truth. Knowledge wasn't shared. And in talking to other people, knowledge wasn't shared with them how to do certain things. And I think part of it was they were so busy taking care of you, being a family, worrying about everyday things. Some people had other things going on in their family more than others. We lived pretty peaceful for the most part. I mean, we had a family dynamic of mental health, which I've talked about in our family, that caused, certain disarray in the household. So we were dealing with that on the death of my mom. So that caused some trauma. But for the most part, we were taught other principles that made us into whole individuals. But certain things were missing, if I'm going to be honest. And so I put down with the finances, with the business, with the knowledge, and with the teaching in response to why we have learned to distrust each other and why our familial bonds are so loose. And some people will say, not my family, not my family. But if I actually sat down and had an honest dialogue and conversation, we make separations in our own families. We click up in our families to a certain degree. Some cousins hang with certain cousins, sisters, brothers, talk to each other, don't talk to each other, uncles, aunties, cousins, extended family. I can show you the divide, whether you want to believe it or not. If we sat down and had a conversation, I'm more than sure that in the average family, I could show where there is a divide. Where you mess with some cousins, but you don't mess with others. And it may be for good reasons or not, but there is divide in most families. And the reason why we know this is happening is because all we have to do is look at our community. The way that you behave in your family is the way that you behave in the community. I keep trying to drive this home. The belief systems that you draw up in your family, whether you're going to be friendly to others outside of your family circle or not, whether you would do business with others outside of your family circle or not. All those things play a role in how we perceive and treat others outside of our family circle that we've created. And as it becomes a model, it grows. And when it grows into communities. And so the community is nothing more than a representation of how people think within their own family, because it's exercise. It's exercised outside of that model. So your family is your first teacher, and then you go out into the community, your second teacher, workplace, third, church, maybe third, whatever. All these things build upon your belief systems and, how you practice them. If they're practiced a particular way, it's going to be representative within the community model. Okay, so these things aren't just happening out of nowhere. It's not like they're just springing out of nowhere. They're coming from a particular specific place, and they're building themselves. And so another thing I wrote down was our teaching institutions do not further supply us with tools to trust, and also teach us small lies build into big lies. And so with our educational system, we learned specific things about our history, especially us being Africans in America, that there's a particular history of us. I remember being, small paragraph on slavery came, slavery ended. Even if I have some of those old books, I like to collect books. And so if I could find one of those books, I'll show you all. I didn't bring it out for this show. And I might be able to find it online, what were some of the prior teachings of texts. Let me see if I can find old textbook information on slavery. Let's say the 1980s. That's when I grew up in the 80s, right? So you got the 70s. Let's see what this one says. Ooh, going back to 1950, I can only imagine the crazy stuff they was writing in the 1950s. I don't want to go back that far just for time purposes. I'm on a time schedule today for sure. Okay, so this one does go back. So this one is an abstract, and it talks about the accounts of slavery, an analysis of United States history textbooks from 1900 to 1992. This was published in 2012. And she just talks about them presenting slavery in a very neutral way initially, making it as an appeal to the market. 50s and 60s, you see the introduction of some limited discussion towards moral wrongs of slavery, while texts of the late 1960s and 70s begin to express an awareness of social values. In the 80s and 90s, the presentation of slavery reflects the nation's not. I don't know, for some reason in my mind, I knew that wasn't correct. Even though nobody had talked to me in detail about slavery in my family or anything like that. But something, when I read it, I was like, I remember asking the teacher, like, that's not all it was it? It was more than that, wasn't it? And the teacher's like, oh, this is all we're going to go into. So I remember being a little rebellious about the information. Let me see if I can find some examples here. Turn this down. I don't want this to kick up. Examples of textbook writings on slavery. Let's see if we can find that, y'all. So just to kind of give an idea of and of course the book people apologize. We're sorry, this is the way it was written. You published it, so not really sure what you're talking about here. But anyway. So this one is what did I find on this? This is The Guardian. It's like a news organization. But they talk about McGraw-Hill education, apologized, and promised to fix the patches that imply slaves came to the U.S. as economic migrants. I think that was fairly recent. I'm sorry, I have to laugh at some of this stuff. But this is Houston, a 9th grade student showed this to their parent. Their parent was like, oh, hell no. This is in a geography book. it refers to slaves as workers. And the young man sent a photo, an annoyed message to his mother. It says, "We was real hard workers, wasn't we?" What year was this article written? Let me see. This was written in 2015. So that's fairly recent that the narrative of slavery is still trying to be written out. But this is not really showing me an example like I want. Let's see if I can find some examples. I be trying not to bust open the school library stuff because that's just cumbersome to look through that stuff. So let's see here. Oh, let me close. This is not what I want either. And Texas has honestly been kind of a problem. You definitely have to have supplemental work if you go to a public school in Texas because they're not going to jump into it necessarily. Although they teach a lot about Texas history and pro-Texas, pro-United States when you're talking about the Alamo and all that kind of stuff. But they're not still depicting the real history. Okay, so this one is the Language Arts Journal of Michigan, written May 2017, and they're talking about, this is a University of Michigan student, talking about Thomas Jefferson's slavery in the language of the textbook, addressing problematic representation. This is a good reference that I could put in the comments for you all. But she just goes into talking about the country and how scholars have identified how communities of color are misrepresented or silenced within the U.S. curricula. Okay, so she's getting into that. And let me see if she gives some text examples. She goes through theoretical perspective methods, Thomas Jefferson data analysis. And let me see if I can find a quick excerpt from here. Here we go. And it's just talking about how, you know, some of the historical figures like Thomas Jefferson, even Abraham Lincoln have been presented. She mostly focused on Thomas Jefferson, but I've seen works where Abraham Lincoln was criticized as a president and how he wasn't the abolitionist that people try to make him out to be. They saw it more of as a country problem and economic problem, wanted to move into a more industrial age, and so the slave trade was hindering that. Hence, the bring about of the Civil War. But anyway, I'm going to test some of this because I can't find, it's not showing me. I mean, it just shows abolition. See, even in this, it's suppressing the information. I mean, you can Google almost anything, but when you start Googling about slavery, you got to dig. You have to dig. Or I have to do the research in advance to have it ready for you all, which as of late I haven't had time to do. And so this is mostly people writing on it. I'll have to try to find some of these older, like this one talks about removing slavery from the textbooks. This was May of 2016. But anyway, just know you all have to probably do your own research because I couldn't quickly find it here. But just know that they're in teaching institutions, you even have to take up, even in college courses, African American studies to really dig into some of those. Depending upon the school, it still doesn't get in depth as it should. You know, not all institutions are built equal, and not all institutions are willing to open up that can of worms, because you do have a segment of the Black community, the African American community, that just want to put the nail in the coffin of slavery. And that's what we are fighting against, because what they're not understanding, in my opinion, is that rug, because so many people don't know, and new generations are being born every year. Okay, and so we have to be able to know that we are not being taught truth. And so if we're not being taught truth, we learn early on, as we find out that these things are not true, to distrust. They go hand in hand, right? So that speaks into the trust section of that. And I wrote down that few trust building exercises at child and adolescent stage is a problem. Jealousy as a replacement factor. So how does jealousy play into a role? The competitive nature that is built within our teaching foundation teaches us to be competitive in more what people like to refer to as crabs in the bucket type of uh, format, where we're kind of taught to pull each other down in order for us to shine. And that's where this terminology, all my haters is coming from, because it's bred from that mentality that in order to shine, people must dislike you or talk about you or make you feel less than and not be supportive of you. Okay. One good example of this is in entertainment. It's been said that the rap game is a doggy dog business because all the gangsters or whatever are joining the rap game as a hustle. Everybody's talking about their life in the hood, whose life in the hood is more gruesome. But really, if you think about it, all we're talking about is killing each other. We're only talking about how we've hurt another person by introducing drugs. We've hurt another person by introducing prostitution and or dancing, dancing as a form of prostitution, but it's not exactly the same, but it is a form of it because a woman is, again, selling her looks, her body in order to make a living, okay? And it's on the whim of men and how men perceive women, and that is translated into rap with women shaking, big booty contest, who got the best body, the baddest bitch, etc., right? All these things are translating over, and we're not seeing it analytically. We're just looking at it as, oh, that's just how they make their money. But why are people having to reduce themselves to make money that way? Now, some people don't consider it a reduction, but I suppose after women have been in it for a while, they begin to see it, because it begins to take a toll. If you're in it for a short amount of time, you have a short-term goal, and you meet that short-term goal, maybe you don't see it. But for women who are in it and try to build a career from it, they realize what the end game really is. If you're not as young as you used to be, if you don't have the body that you used to, you're out. So similar to modeling, similar to acting, these economies are very volatile. They don't necessarily drive the way regular business does, and they have a moralistic factor to it that makes a person kind of reduce maybe some of their belief systems or ignore them so that they can get through living that kind of lifestyle. And that's just the reality. That's just what is happening within that group. And so jealousy plays a factor in all of those industries, entertainment industry especially, because if you're not, it's almost like a gladiator sport in a different way. If you're not the best, if you're not stomping on somebody else or, making a song showing how you're better than other people, then your music's not hot. Okay? And that's what we're graduating to without us even realizing it. And so you must make people jealous of you in order to make a come up. If people aren't jealous of you, then you're not really doing anything anyway. If people are not talking about you in a negative, like, you're really not doing anything anyway. I've even seen memes, out on social media that talks about if you don't have any haters, then you're not important, you're not relevant. So that's a whole different culture, paradigm, and mindset that's being created, and that's in existence. And I can't say that it hasn't always been there, but it's definitely in your face now. It's not subtle. It's a known, and talk about that. And so when we come back to these behaviors, unfortunately, we have to come back to, yet again, that Willie Lynch doctrination, which was very influential. I was just talking to a coworker the other day, and he put up the Willie Lynch document, and I told him, I said, listen, you need to read this at home. Don't read it at work. I'm just telling you about it if you want to read it, later. It just has some interesting information. And he decided to read it at home, and he came back to work the next day, and he even brought it up to me. I had forgotten about it, and he said, I read it. And I said, you read it? And I said, well, what were some of the things that you were thinking? He said, at first it was anger. And then he said there came an understanding, like, wow, I never even really knew about this document. I say, yeah, it was basically the slave Bible to many white Southerners and Northerners. and slave owners so that they can understand how to make their plantation in their mind more peaceful, how to make the people that they were enslaving obey, because they knew that, well, you think about the idea of chattel slavery, it's not based upon a debt someone owes, so they're not going to feel morally obligated to you. It's not based upon a violation, as biblical terms tend to put it, as you violated a household by violating the commandments, and so therefore we can put you in slavery because you violated the commandments, and so you no longer have the freedoms because you're not obeying. It's not under that premise. The money is being owed. As a matter of fact, you're using my body in order to earn, and so people keep having this back and forward as to why there's a difference being made in slavery and why the slavery that was on the continent, to a certain degree, maybe not necessarily perpetrated by the Arabs then, but perpetrated by other tribal groups, why it was not necessarily the same. And some people argue, well, slavery is wrong no matter what. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but just like there's different levels of prison sentencing. Okay, when you go to prison, you have different offenders. There are different levels. They're all in. Yeah, it sucks, but some are able to get out unscathed, whereas others are very traumatized because they're in there with the killers, the hardcore, people that just don't have the same mindset as what a petty thief might have, right? So, those are just some things to think about when you think about slavery. Try to think about the levels of prison and the type of people that are in prison. And so the worst kind of slavery would be those who are in prison for murder, rape, and things like that. And so their servitude is a lot harder than the people that they're so-called mingling with. I don't even know if you call it mingling, but having to socialize with are just at a different mindset and level. Some of them are psychotic, manipulative. Some of them are even genius in their psychosis. So, you got a lot that you're dealing with. So when you look at slavery and you look at chattel slavery, you're saying that's the most degrading form of slavery that you can have in existence. And its purpose is to break down, is to demean, is to strip. Okay, that was not necessarily the goal of other types of slavery. So one thing to look at is, what is the end goal? What is the end goal? Was the end goal to make this person virtually be in servitude for the rest of their life, or were they to serve a time and move on? Okay, and so those things play a role. The Willie Lynch doctrination in our culture is a factor. And some of us say, well, I'm not like that anymore. Well, if you pay attention to sociologists who are studying this in more detail and breaking these things down and placing them into applicable categories that can be applied and evaluated, then you begin to realize why this is playing such the role that it is. You got boys against boys, girls against girls, girls versus boys at every level. At every level. And so when we talk about boys versus girls, we're talking about the breakdown of the female-male dynamic relationship. You can see it. Girls versus girls. Women are said in the African-American community, we can't get along with each other. Not for long periods of time. We don't work together very well. And then boys against boys, well, when you talk about this black-on-black crime statistic that has been worked in, okay? So we can see it. We can stay in denial if we want to, or we can choose to open our eyes and see what is going on and why trust and truth is being broken down in our community, because we're not getting to the truth of the matter of what's happening, and we're not trusting each other anymore, okay? All these breakdowns that I've written down, I thought of these things within minutes. I didn't have to take a long time to write them down. I just didn't want to forget those ideals to kind of drive home my point of what I'm saying. So the third thing that I wrote down is why truth-telling is important as a catalyst to revolution, and why the oppressors of humanity fear this kind of unity. How and why we have had the power all along. So this is going to expound my message because, again, I'm supposed to be looking for solutions, right? The whole purpose of my show is to present a problem and try to apply some solutions that I think would help. And so with this one, the beginning part is the truth-telling. We've been truth-telling for about going on 100 years now. If you go back to Sheikh Anta Diop's work, not quite 100 years, but you go back to his work and you try to go forward from there when people have been trying to get this information out. Then you had, the Dr. Benz come out, then the Dr. Clarks, and, all these people coming out, some simultaneously. Sheikh Anta Diop was born in 1923, so you give him about 17, 18 years to become an adult. So you say 1940s or so, his information came out. Before him, it was Elijah Muhammad trying to pull that in. Dr. Ben was born in 1918, so again, add about 18 or so years and about another 10 to that for them to really develop their craft and get information out there. Dr. John Henry Clark, he was born in 1915. So you had all these great men come along. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima was born in 1935. Chancellor Williams was born in 1893. And he was talking about these things. If you haven't heard of any of these people, all you got to do is just Google one of them, and it shows a nice timeline of all of them. Dr. Martin, they're like, they relate them all together automatically. Marcus Garvey, 1887, he was born. You have a Frantz Fanon. I haven't listened to any of his yet, but he's a psychiatrist and philosopher and a revolutionary, as he's described. And he was born in 1925. And then, of course, we talked about Sheikh Anta Diop. Sheikh Anta Diop, I believe is how you correctly pronounce it, because he's a Frenchman, African-born in French, right? 1923. So these are some of the major players they put up. And now that I see Dr. Frantz Fanon, I can refer back to his work. I've studied some of Marcus Garvey, John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben. That's the book I showed you. That's Dr. Yusuf Ben Yohanan that published this book here. And this is an older picture of him here. But their books are here. Let me make sure you all can see that. And all these people delved into those subjects that are tough, because we have to first admit that our education did not come from our ancestors necessarily, not their schools of thought. We learned the European school of thought. Okay, that's just what happened. And as soon as we can better understand that, looks like I am pausing here on the live stream. Hopefully that comes back. But as we are delving into knowledge building, some people are going to be a lot further along than some of us. And so it's important that some of us stay back and start from the beginning, right? It's almost like school. You start off in kindergarten and you graduate on. Well, the information about us, we're going to have to start back from kindergarten and progress on, because of the fact that we've been miseducated. It's going to take some time. Okay, so my live stream is going, but it looks like it is cycling. So let me try to refresh it here and see if YouTube will catch up. It's sad that it does this, but it does. So I need to be talking about our tech, how we got to get our tech better. But anyway, so I got this back on. Hopefully it's back up. And just stop cycling. Okay. So, anyway, I just went through and I Googled Sheikh Anta Diop. And I've put some of their information in my past, live streams. And so I could put some more information on here. And it's good to have pen and paper to write some of these things down. But if you put any of their names in, Google actually goes across a list of people. And I've written down their names in the back of my book. I have lots of books that I write in, but I write all this stuff down. So, Who knows what'll happen with the internet and where information will go and how they're redesigned it. You know, you never know if things could be redesigned in a way. So the reason why we've been split apart is things like Shays Rebellion, okay? Um, that was a very significant rebellion in this country when you talk about slavery. And the basis of Shays Rebellion, um, it was an uprising. It happened in Massachusetts during 1786 and 1787. There was a Revolutionary War veteran named Daniel Shay. He led 4,000 rebels in an uprising against perceived economic and civil rights. Okay, that was the basis of it. Again, a lot of times these things had nothing to do with slavery, but it did have to do with the group. And then you also have Bacon's Rebellion, which was very important. Whiskey Rebellion, Battles of Saratoga, Boston Massacre, French and Indian War. And the reason why these things are important is because what it showed is that when the masses of people get tired of something, the only option they see is a rebellion. And the rebellion is usually violent and bloody. And the reason being is because those who hold the power are not willing to listen to or understand anything else but violence. Violence is something that they understand because then their families become vulnerable and they have to figure out how to protect their families. And they're relying on people who are loyal to them to protect them. Because for the most part, people who hold the power don't have any more power than what people give to them. If we can understand that certain truth, then we can begin to progress along. You put in power who you want. You allow those to be in power over you who you choose. Who is your king? Who is your queen? Who is your leader? Who is your president? Who is your candidate? You give that person power because without you, there is no power to that individual, okay? And so I don't think we understand our power because we've been told the whole time that we are the minority. We don't do this, we don't do that. We always listen to what people tell us that we're not, what we don't do. Just because something is not occurring doesn't mean it can't change and that we can't begin to work on that particular area that maybe we are not doing something as well as we can. I don't believe my people are so far gone that there's no reason to talk to us anymore. There's no reason to get us involved. We are disconnected from each other for a lot of reasons. You know, if we don't share pain, right? So if a person doesn't understand my walk of life, then I don't really want to be affiliated with them because they don't understand where I'm coming from. I think that's a mistake because sometimes what that person have that you don't have can be a strength builder for you. And it goes back to that jealousy thing. We're looking at each other as where we don't have anything in common with that person because they don't understand the struggle. They don't struggle like I struggle. We're all struggling. Okay, that's a commonality, and your struggle doesn't have to be the same. Why does the struggle need to be the same in order for you to understand that we have the same goal, and that's to get our culture group out of this paradigm that we are the subgroup to serve other groups. We don't want to be the subgroup to serve other groups, right? We want to be our own movers and shakers, our own boss. And so until we understand that we are under the direction of someone else and other people's will, we're not going to understand the bigger picture. We're looking at it in our own little pockets. I'm doing fine, so that ain't my problem. Well, it is your problem because number one, if your situation can be changed by the loss of income based upon another company's decision, then you're affected. Or if your business is not going to thrive because the consumers that were able to come to you are now being unemployed and don't have that capital anymore to come and support your business, it affects you. So it affects us in one way or another, whether you are a business owner, a professional, or, you know, what they like to call a blue-collar worker. Everything's about categories, right? And so when you look at, it's good to study those rebellions because it tells you something about our country too. The principles in which our country lived by and the only way that our country reacts. Unfortunately, there is a model here and there is a pattern here that lets you know that it's not until certain things take place that the country changes. And so when they talk about growing pains, that is literal. it is not something that is simple or easy for change to come about. It takes sacrifice, and if you look at it for what it is, unfortunately, it does take bloodshed. It takes bloodshed, no matter how you look at it. But if you just look up Shay's rebellion, it rolls into all the other rebellion, SHAY rebellion. It rolls into all these other rebellions that played a role in shaping our country. Prohibition, whether they were racial or not, there always is a race aspect in America. Okay, so even when you look at a particular problem, whether it be political or societal, whatever, it does break down to race in a lot of ways. And then on a surface, it'll look like it's not about race, but when you go deep underneath, you'll figure out that it's about trying to keep one group of people from getting a particular benefit. That's what this country is made of. And the sooner we can understand what our country is made of, because a lot of us don't know United States history for what it is. We know a portion of it. It seemed boring. It didn't involve us. And so we turned away from it. Like, oh, that's boring. I don't want to hear about it. But I had to learn to love history. I didn't always love history. I didn't always love geography. I had to learn to love these things, because what I learned that there's a lot of information encapsulated within these areas, and they're hidden. And so, there was a saying that white folks used to say, that if you want to hide anything from African Americans, all you got to do is put it in a book. Well, what does that tell you what they think of us? And how much truth is in that? Do we read the way that we should? If someone's saying a joke or something about you, then you have to look to the truth of that and say, how much truth is built into this? Because people are saying things about us. How much is true? How much is a stereotype? Where did the information come from? One truth that we have to explore is our inability to work with each other. It's just not happening. It's hard to get us together, except to party, for a funeral, and for weddings. And when you begin to look at why people attend any of those, you begin to see the shade in that too. So it's just, we have to get better at our relationships with each other. If we can begin to work on our relationships with each other, then we can help solve some of the problems, not all of them, some of the problems. If we begin to greet each other when we see each other, something so simple. I tried to get my son to start something on campus where he, it's a simple campaign. It's not going to cost him any money, but we begin to speak to each other again. When we see each other, we say, hi, how you doing? We just don't walk past each other. Hey, how you doing? How you doing, brother? How you doing, sister? All right. And then once you start speaking to each other, you begin to realize that you talk more. Okay. You talk to each other more, because then you've broken the ice of speaking, being polite with each other, being courteous with each other. What I've noticed is, since we've been having these racial wars again in our country that sprouts up ever so often, we'll have a little bit of calm, but race wars always sprout up in this country. It's because of the way this country was developed. It's not going to stop in that way, because this country was built on a particular premise. And once you build a foundation in a particular way, to change that paradigm is difficult, because the foundation is still there. Okay, if you build your house on sand, and no matter how many upgrades you put on that house, if the earth shifts a particular way, your house is going to slide down the damn street. Hence the mudslides that are going on. Houses built on unstable land. And people are like, what's going on? You built the homes on unstable land. Okay. And once that land decides to shift and move, it's going to do what it do. Okay. That's the foundation. And so the foundation of the United States was built on racism, slavery, bigotry, misogyny, all these unfortunate negative things that we wish we could change, but we cannot. Okay. And they are ingrained, and they're being retaught. All families are not teaching their children about being fair and just. They teach a variation of it. Oh, well, this, that, and the other. Or they try to kind of be manipulative with it. Or you just live it. If I live in a community that is homogenous to one culture group, I'm teaching that. I'm teaching my children, this is what you live around. This is what you should feel comfortable with. Don't live in those other group areas. Live with your people. I don't even have to say it. It's a practice. And so the mindset is no longer having to be so outwardly vulgar. And you have to understand, some of them are living with some of their grandparents that are their bestest friends. Grandpa and grandpa say things. They watch the news and they say things out loud, and the kids are there. And so this is a perpetual chain that's never going to break, okay? And I hate to use never, but as long as people have mindsets, they're going to continue to perpetrate that to the next generation. And this is what we're looking at. We're looking at generational legacies of sociology, okay? Just like we might, the African American community, a lot of us teach our children about slavery because we don't want them to forget. Well, if we're teaching our children about slavery and what happened there, what are other people teaching their children? Are they also teaching their children about slavery and what happened there? And what perspective and mindset are they teaching them from? All these things play a role, right? In truth and trust building. And so we have to work within with our social group and fix that first before we can try to go out and run out and kumbaya with other social groups. Our social group is hurting. We don't have the love and care and trust that we had anymore. I see it all the time. I see the strain. I know it's there. Whether I choose to address it or not on individual levels is my choice to whether or not I do that. But I know that it's there. It exists. It exists in families. It exists outside of families. It's starting a family and it's carried out into the workplace. It's carried out into education. It's carried out into everywhere. And so, you can't avoid it because it was a construct. It was a foundational build. And now that we are in 2018 years, AD as some people like to call it, or CTE or whatever you want to call it, you just have a lot of years of practice, and so it is what it is. So I wrote about we don't need a savior, we need self-growth. Why I keep talking about this savior syndrome that we have is because we have had martyred people in our community who have died for the cause, or who have died with a broken heart because the cause did not understand them, or they had a following at a certain point and then people fell off because fear was inflicted. One of the tools of the enemy, and I want to make sure to draw a line here, we do have an enemy to the African American culture. There are enemies out there who don't want to see us progress, who feel that we should be in the exact position that we're in and don't want us to have the information. That's why the information was hidden in the first place, is because there are people who do not want us to benefit from the knowledge of self, of who we are, what contributions that we made, and therefore if we have made those contributions before, why can't we make them now? There's power in knowledge of self, in that when you begin to build yourself, your truth of who you are. Even for my Bible readers, how many people are reading the Bible with the perspective that they're talking about you? Or are they talking about another people? How many people read, any of the religious texts and see themselves in that religious text? Or when you read it, do you imagine another people? And so if that is the case, if that is your truth, how can you use a book that talks about other people and not necessarily your direct ancestors near and far to help you understand who you are? Because that's telling you a story about someone else necessarily, right? Some of us will argue, oh no, that was talking about us, the black people, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Again, research who the book is talking about and who the book was meant for, and you'll find out that that's maybe not necessarily the intent of the author. The author was not necessarily talking about you. We've written ourselves into things because we want to believe that these things were talking about us, but the author of those books were speaking about a specific people. I don't know why. Let's see why it's not in there. Good. They were talking about a specific people. And when they were talking about the specific people, they intended for those people to gain. This thing is really tripping. To gain particular knowledge, so they could a particular knowledge, so that they could benefit what those perceive as the. This is not working anymore. Talk to these folks. Might need a new cord. What they perceived as inheriting the kingdom of God, right? We're inheriting my Father's wealth, as we like to refer to. But again, I just encourage people to do a little bit more research on their spiritual backgrounds, their religious practices, to understand that what is being talked about in that book is speaking of you, because there are some religious texts that are speaking to a specific group of people, and only those group of people are the ones that are going to benefit. And some of us latch on to that and think that they're talking about us, but they're not. And religion and churches have become a financial institution, so just be careful. Be careful about who you serve and why you serve them. Don't serve blindly. Understand what you have privileged information to know about and make sure that it's meeting your expectation. So when I say we don't need a savior, what I mean is that we want other people to do the work. We want other people to do the research, to put the information to our head. A lot of people are building videos so that they can try to get the people the information. But to be honest, if we're going to change our paradigm, it's going to require that we do the work on ourselves. There is no way of getting around it. No one else is going to necessarily do the work for you. Now, do people build companies and businesses that allow them to make money and benefit because they did a service that they're providing to you? Yes, absolutely, that is there. But when you're talking about knowledge and information that can help you grow as an individual, that is a self-help tool, and it's going to require that you build yourself up full of information in order to understand maybe why you're in the situation that you're in. So if you are having trouble with a particular area, it may require for you to look up other people who've had trouble in that area and what they did to solve it. And then that begins that rabbit hole of information. Once you pull up information, you just keep finding more and more information, and you end up spending your days and time kind of reading more and researching more than necessarily watching reality TV. Entertainment is fun and it's fine, but my grandfather used to always tell me that the television, he called it the idiot box because what he knew was that it was programming. He understood that it's programming you to think a particular way through subliminal messaging, whether it is advertising, whether it is putting up a show to put an ideal out. Everything is subliminal messaging when it comes to television programming. And so being careful about what you watch makes a difference. That's part of self-growth. So the way that we build trust and truth in our families, in our relationships, and let it grow is to start within our own household. Maybe teaching your children as sisters and brothers not to bully each other, okay, under the roof. And you may laugh at it like, oh, they're just playing. But really what you're teaching them is how to bully others, because they're learning to bully each other. And then they go out with that behavior and they team up and they go out with that behavior in the schools. I can't tell you how much my children have had to deal with bullying in schools. It's such a common place. It's not just the one big bully that's the big kid out of everybody. No, everybody's becoming a bully. And everybody is finding it okay to talk about each other or to say mean things about each other. And they think that's normal. We capping on each other. Okay, that number one, that's not everybody's thing. And when you start capping on people, did you ask them permission first? So no, you don't do it. That's not how it works, right? And some people may argue, well, we're making our kids more sensitive and things like that. Well, what you're not recognizing is that these are social ills that have been happening all along that we didn't recognize as a problem. And we allowed it to continue because we considered it a norm. And now look where it has gotten us. Our children are more aggressive, more bullying, and they're not aggressive in the right way. I don't believe in getting rid of aggression. I believe in directing it towards the right things. Aggression is a tool if it is used properly. We are being aggressive towards each other. We are annihilating each other. That's not how aggression should be used. okay? And until we learn how to treat each other within a culture group, we're not going to be able to operate in this world in a meaningful way. We're going to continue to be the underdog, the consumer for everyone else, because we have not yet learned how to deal with each other. So gaining our knowledge, learning how to teach our youth to be whole individuals and not these partial individuals that have all these problems, you know. And that takes for us to grow up within ourselves. You have a lot of adults that unfortunately have not grown up. They still believe in interesting things. The clothes that you have on is who you are. Whether you have your makeup flawless is who you are. How you wear your hair is who you are. Don't get me wrong. I believe in being neat. I believe in looking nice. You know, that's something that I've taken into myself. But what I've learned is that those things are not what makes the biggest difference. Look at Don King. Don King used to wear his hair standing on top of his head. What he proved is that it don't matter how I wear my hair. It matter how I promote these boxing games, these boxing matches, who I rub elbows with. Now he feels he's part of the elite. He, from my understanding, is believing in what he believes in, right? So he's taking his wealth and he does what he wants with it. But I just gave the example of him not caring what people think about him as an individual, and he went on and did what he had to do to live in this society. Another example of that would be the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam for years have been moving on their own little trajectory. They're not in line with everyone else. They've actually been kind of against some of the most status quo, but they're still surviving as an organization. Why? Because they've realized that one important thing is sticking to our beliefs and building from it. So they not only had a belief system, they have a working institution that is helping young black men and young black women to realize themselves through a religious practice, but also through the works within an economy. So they built their own economy, okay, and it's working for them. So if you want to study an economy that's working, study their economy. That's within the black paradigm, okay? You can study other economies and build it into your own, so long as it helps benefit the culture of black, okay, because that's important. That's another good simple example that I can give. If you look at Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker was a millionaire in a time where black millionaires was not as common. And so if you study what she did and study her life, maybe that'll help you understand how to build from the ground up, especially in an economy that tells you that you are not meant to earn more than what we tell you to earn. You are not meant to be more than what we tell you to be. So there's lots of great examples out here to teach us how to work together, build truth according to our paradigm. Truth is subjective, but trust is universal. So we can trust each other again if we learn each other's truths and if we learn to respect each other's truth. So, you know, I may not go about doing things the way that you do them or live my life exactly the way that you live it, but I can learn from you. I don't have to do everything exactly the way that you do it, but I can learn from you. I can learn from your example for good or for bad and incorporate it into my life as I see fit. But I don't have to disrespect people or be against people who are different from me or believe different from me. I can learn how yours operates in your society. And the best example I can give is the living example of, okay, this is how I live my truth and this is what I do. This is how you live your truth and this is how you do. Who's becoming more successful in their paradigm? Oh, you more successful? Okay, well, let's see what you're doing. Break down what you're doing and say, oh, I can use that element and plug it in over here. I can't use everything that you're using, but I can use this element, plug it over here. That's how other cultures and societies work and have gained, because they're not, no culture group is monolithic. Nobody thinks exactly the same. You have some culture groups that seem like they're so together, but it's because they understand a greater cause. And because they understand a greater cause, they're willing to put aside their familial differences, their community differences, their political differences, and come together and work on a common goal and make that goal move. There's conflict everywhere. When you look at any country, if you actually study any country and really break down their politics, what's going on, look at how many poor people they have in their country, there's always conflict. That will not go away. But for one culture group to be the underdog in pretty much every society that you go visit them in and look at their breakdown, I'm talking about the culture of black. we have been the underdogs in many societies for many years. We have to begin to evaluate why that's happening and not ignore it anymore. So as I leave you with this message, and trust and truth is a very broad subject. I've narrowed it down some for a few things for us to work on and begin to look at. I want us to work on our jealousy. If I gave any task for us to work on, and that is jealousy. Jealousy and envy is one of the biggest tasks. Nobody's life is perfect. Nobody is doing everything the right way. Some of us are doing things a little bit better than others. And so again, learn from that individual, learn from what they're doing and incorporate it. And for those who are successful, yes, I have a message for you. If you are successful and you're doing things in a way that's making you appear to be better off than the masses, can you please just do me one favor? Can you get the rhetoric of hater out of your mouth? Okay. In a lot of cases, it doesn't belong. In a lot of cases, you're perpetuating this hate by continuously trying to make people feel a certain kind of way if they don't have what you have. Okay? This is real. This is happening. It's not anyone's figment of imagination. Now, can you be happy without others being unhappy? No, that can happen. Okay? So there's like this balance going on, right? I talked about my aunt in my religious I don't even want to call them religious, at my spiritual broadcast. The principle of my eye is a balance, but there's going to be good and there's going to be so-called evil, okay? It's there. It's the ups and the downs, the downside. That's how companies flourish. They look at the pros of having a company and they have to look at the cons. If they don't look at the cons and perceive them and be ready for them as they will come, that company will fail. So all things have to look at the upside and the downside. And so all I'm asking is those who are on the up, who are doing well, find you someone to teach to. Or, someone asks you a question, don't be nasty to them. Just, simply give them the answer. Or, if they're not talking in a way that you think they should be talking to you, move on. You don't have to one up everybody. You don't always have to beat somebody out. Oh yeah, beast, ooh, beast. That's like when we were kids. As we grow to adults, you pick your battles, just like in a marriage. You pick your battles. You don't have to battle every single person every single time. Because sometimes you end up looking like a hypocrite. Or you end up making a fool of yourself. And so picking our battles wisely. Is it worth the battle? Is it worth the fight? Some things aren't worth the fight. And so, I hope that these few things that I've put out here helps you. Unfortunately, we have to tie things back into our enslavement because it did create a mindset. And so when we talk about these things, unfortunately, the focus sometimes does become our enslavement because we have not yet graduated from those teachings, from those social ills that were inflicted upon us and became a part of our culture, unfortunately. Some of the foods that we eat come from eating food during our enslavement, and we redesigned them and put love on them because that's who we are as people. But we have to understand that now that we can let some of those things go, we're going to have to let them go because they're not healthy for us. And people have monetized them and build profiting businesses from our unhealthy eating. So all these things we have to understand are culture. They're culture, good for bad, bad for good. Use as much of the good as we can and disperse of the bad. So that's my message to us today, to me. So when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to me too. These are things that I can use and have used in my own life. So I'm no preacher. I'm no expert. I'm just a human being living this life just like you are. And whatever information I have, I'm willing to share because that's what I want us to do. Again, is to begin to share with each other because I care about the Black community. I care about all things Black. I just do. And if somebody try to shame me for it, I really don't care. Don't matter to me. And so anyway, I hope y'all have a good Sunday. I'm going to be working later today, but I'm going to enjoy my work because you know what? I'm earning. So it's all right. It ain't killing me. So you all have a good day and go do something positive. Peace.